Chapter 18. Into the Maze. Jack fell for the space of one breath, then plopped softly into a pit of foam bricks. He struggled to sit upright and looked around. It was dark, but the rim of the pit was just visible, and he half rolled, half crawled to its edge. "Jack, you all right?" Sprint called, his voice surprisingly far away. Jack turned his head upward. 3 shadows peered down at him from the circular opening. "Yeah, it's safe," he yelled as he reached the side. One by one they dropped down into the foam bricks, and soon they were all standing on the cement floor surrounding the pit, letting their eyes adjust. This room was only slightly larger than the one above, with dim white lights notched into the walls. There was a door, sealed, and a flat rectangle mounted high up along the wall next to it. A television. The screen was black, but it cast a glowing halo of light. "Now what?" Sprint asked, pressing his paws against the unmoving door. As if in answer, an electronic melody sounded, and a bright light from the television drew all of their attention that way. "Hello," said a pleasantly voiced woman, some sort of exotic deer. She wore a colored blue uniform beneath a face of light brown fur, with heavy eyeshadow that pronounced her over large eyes. "And congratulations on making it to the final trial. In a few moments, the door before you will open, and you will enter the playing field." She spoke as though reading her lines from a teleprompter. "As you enter the maze, you will find a flag of either red or blue. Your job is to defend this flag without moving it, while locating and capturing the flag from the opposing team. You are encouraged to use your antenna and skills in this task, but you are not allowed to harm your opponents. Keep in mind, you are being considered now as a team. You succeed or fail together. Good luck." She finished with a smile. The same electronic tone played, and the screen went black, leaving only blue text with the words, "Stand by." Sprint looked away from the TV. "Considered as a team?" he groaned. "Great. Wish they'd told us that before we joined forces with Our Lady of Rigor Mortis." Maddie shot him a venomous look. "My antenna won't work in this case anyway," she said. "We'll be in an iron maze. My power is blocked by iron, so unless I can look directly into sunlight while being in the same part of the maze as the other team—" "Oh, fabulous," Sprint cut across her. "So instead of turning us all into mannequins, you'll be completely useless." "No, I won't," she snapped. "Being a hero is not about antenna, it's about heart." "That's beautiful. When the other team gets here, why don't you recite some more poetry to them?" "It's not poetry, that's Aaron Harding, King of Hearts. Maybe you've heard of him?" "Would you two shut up?" the frog barked. "We need a strategy." He looked between them. Neither argued. "Some of us will need to protect the flag. Some of us will need to go find theirs. So what can you all do?" "I'm going out there," Maddie said. "I won't be any use to protecting the flag, not without sunlight. At least I can look around." "I'm going too," Sprint said. "I can run the flag back in a second, because, I don't require sunlight to do my job." "Great," Willie said. "Well, I'm staying at the entrance and protecting our flag. So which of you is staying and which of you is going?" he asked, looking between Jack and Hoover. "I'll stay," Hoover said. "Looks like you're with me," Sprint said. Jack nodded uncertainly, not feeling like he'd be of much use to either team. A silence fell between them, and they stood in the semi-darkness, watching the door like racehorses at a starting gate. But the silence dragged on and on, seconds turning to minutes, minutes stretched into an hour, until finally— "It's changed!" Maddie said with a start. "Would you two get your tails out of that foam pit? The TV says we're next." Jack, who was just about to lob another foam brick at Sprint, turned toward the monitor. Sure enough, the text had changed from "Stand by" to "Your team is next." They climbed awkwardly back out of the pit, just as the television came to life once more. "In a moment," the same dear woman said, "the doors before you will open, and you will enter the arena floor. You will have 15 minutes to navigate the maze and return with the opposing team's flag. Good luck." The screen went blank again, and they stood in nervous silence. Jack next to Sprint, Sprint next to Maddie, ready to bolt into the maze. Just when Jack began to wonder how long they would have to wait, a tone sounded, and a blue number appeared at the center of the screen. 3. He felt as if he'd forgotten how to swallow. Another tone. 2. He looked back at the door. 1. The door slid upward, and a horn blared somewhere beyond. There was a flash of motion, blowing Jack's ears sideways. He turned to see only Maddie looking back at him. She raised a brow in surprise, and Jack smiled despite his nerves. They ran as fast as they could through the open space. A field of grass surrounded what looked like an enormous silver block, about 30 feet tall, with rivets running along its seams. At the center, a gap in the construction extended from top to bottom, opening into the maze. Sprint had already disappeared inside. As they drew closer, Jack could see a red flag mounted into the left wall of the entry chamber. The air was cooler in the shade and silence of the maze. The sound of their heavy breathing reverberated off the iron walls, which opened high above them to blue sky. They reached the end of the chamber, a T-junction splitting in opposite directions. "Guess we'll have to split," Jack started, but Maddie had already picked up pace along the path to the right. He sighed, turned to the left, and started off again at a jogging pace. Having no idea what or who to expect, Jack allowed his feet to carry him through the wide corridors. First a right, another right, a left. He worked deeper into the maze, taking this turn or that without any conscious reason. He quickly became turned around, uncertain even of the direction he was heading. Was he running toward his own flag now? It all looked the same in here, dirt floors and pewter walls that opened to the sky. He took another left, a right, right again, straight past an opening, then through the next one. As he rounded a corner, he found himself in a familiar space. The corridor opened onto a grass field, a wall of doors at the opposite end. He was back at the beginning. Frustrated, he started to turn around, but his eyes fell on the flag, and he halted. It was blue. He'd done it. He'd found the other team's flag. Admittedly, he had no idea how he'd done it, but there it was, undefended and untouched. But as he took a step toward it, something moved in the opening. It started from beyond the walls, a yellow line stretching deliberately across the path. Then a second one stretched across the first. The two of them formed a yellow X like tape across a crime scene. "Not so fast," a voice said, and a head moved like an anaconda around the edge of the opening. It passed below the X on an overlong neck, smiling up at Jack, who recognized the face of the Letterman giraffe from the bus. His neck zigzagged back and forth, looking much too long and limber, even for a giraffe. Jack looked at the X and realized it was the giraffe's outstretched arms, pulled like bungee cables across the entryway. The giraffe grinned menacingly. "You want our flag? You'll have to get past me." From Jack's left, there was a blur of motion, zipping beneath the X and out again in one swift move. "No problem, Princess," Sprint goaded, holding the blue flag over his head. "Princess!" the giraffe yelled. "Hey, I'm a guy!" "If you say so," Sprint laughed. He looked at Jack, nodded back into the maze, and took off once more. Smiling at the thunderstruck look on the giraffe's face, Jack turned and bolted back up the chamber. Now to find his way back. The first turn had been a left, which meant he needed to turn right. But he felt less certain as he passed an opening to his left. Had he come from there, or from the next one? He started down the nearest one, second-guessed himself, and turned back. He took the next path, trying his best to recognize any of his surroundings. But every hall was that same dark iron, indistinguishable from any of the others. "Watch it!" someone yelled, and he was knocked to the ground. Sprint came to a skidding halt, stomach first in the dirt. The flag landed a few feet away. "Oh!" the squirrel groaned as he pushed himself to stand, then hobbled over to help Jack to his feet. "Sorry, guy," he said. I solved the maze by running down every chamber, but I couldn't remember how to get back, so I just started doing the same thing again. Guess I should have been watching where I was going." As Jack brushed himself off, a glint caught his eye. The key. It had slipped from his pocket as he fell. He stooped down and picked it up, shooting a nervous glance toward Sprint. Fortunately, the squirrel had been distracted by a familiar voice. "Why are you guys just standing there? Is that the flag?" Maddie came jogging up the hall. "Yes," Sprint said, striding over to the fallen flag and snapping it up. "We found it." "Good for you," Maddie sneered. "Were you going to take it back to our base or claim this land in the name of the squirrels?" "Funny," Sprint started, but he was interrupted as someone else rounded the corner. "You!" said an angry voice. It was the sunburned shrew from that morning. He was shorter than Jack, with beady eyes behind round spectacles, and the same kind of collared shirts Hoover wore. His expression was murderous as he strode toward Maddie. "You're the one that pulled a Gary Green on the ship! What are you doing here? I thought they kicked you out, you loser!" Maddie had looked surprised when he'd singled her out, but her eyes narrowed at these words, and she took a step forward, towering over the shrew. "What did you call me?" she growled. Jack rushed between them. "No!" he yelled. "The team is being evaluated together," he said. "If you get disqualified, we all get disqualified. Just let him—" The rest of the words caught in his throat. In his effort to separate them, he had gripped Maddie's arm, and in an instant, a horrible change came over her. Her eyes seemed to grow 3 times larger, solid black orbs that made her look like an insect. Her skin became loose and wrinkled, as though the flesh beneath it had withered away. Ribs were visible beneath her shirt, and her hips became so gaunt she looked nearly skeletal. She even seemed to have trouble standing, wobbling around weakly as she turned her overlarge eyes on Jack.
"How could you possibly understand, you stupid boy?" she said in a frail whisper. "I'm bossy, or I'm just a girl. I'm looking for attention, or I'm dressed like a slob. I have to be perfect all the time, but they all think I'm fat. They all think I'm weak. They all think I'm a loser."
She wailed this last sentence as though in a bad impression of a ghost. Terrified, Jack became tangled in her bone-thin limbs, and they toppled over together. There was a sudden burst of light, like a flashbulb of an old camera, and he landed with a thud on the dirt floor of the maze. He felt as rigid as a statue, completely paralyzed. He was trapped.